Howard is a successful advertising agent who was once full of life, creative ideas, and energy. His career was at its peak and the team he led was thriving. Howard was always a man who set high goals and achieved them. He spoke to his colleagues about the importance of human connection, explaining that all advertising ultimately addresses the three things of love, time, and death. These are the three basic forces that drive every human being. However, shortly after his career reaches a high point, Howard's personal life suffers a catastrophe. His young daughter dies of a rare disease. This blow proves devastating for Howard. He closes in on himself, sinks into a deep depression and loses interest in work and life in general. He can no longer find meaning in his profession, in communication with colleagues and friends. Before he was a leader and inspirer, but now he is turned into a man who is barely recognizable. His friends and colleagues Whit, Claire and Simon watch as their friend slowly destroys his life. They realize that if nothing is done, Howard will not only ruin himself, but also their business. They are deeply attached to him and want to help him, but realize that to do so they need to do something extraordinary. Each of them is also going through their own struggles. Whit is recently divorced and desperately trying to mend his relationship with his daughter, who is estranged from him. Claire is in a state of personal crisis, feeling empty and fearful of the future as she has been unable to realize her dreams of having a family. Simon hides a serious illness from his wife and children. Not knowing how to deal with it, they decide to have an intervention to make Howard realize reality and bring him back to life. One day they find 3 letters in his office that Howard wrote but never sent. These letters were not addressed to people, but to the abstract concepts of death and love time. Howard blames them for all his misfortunes, trying to find answers and explanations for his pain. Inspired by these letters, Whit, Claire, and Simon come up with a plan. They decide to hire actors to play the roles of time, death, and love to meet Howard and answer his letters. Their goal is to shock him, make him realize the absurdity of his despair and bring him back to reality. To do this, they enlist 3 actors: Bridget, Amy, and Raffi. Bridget is to play death, Amy love, and Raffi time. Each of them approaches their role with their own unique interpretation, trying to make it as convincing and emotional as possible. These 3 actors, despite their professional lives, also have their own problems that they try to solve by taking part in this unusual play. Howard's first encounter with the characters takes place in a cafe, where Bridget, played by Death, approaches him and bluntly tells him that she has received his letter. Howard reacts skeptically at first. He thinks it's some kind of evil joke, maybe someone decided to play on him, taking advantage of his vulnerable state. But Bridget doesn't back down. She continues to talk to him as if she were really Death, discussing his feelings, his grief, and his letters. At one point Howard begins to waver. His confidence that this is all a farce begins to wane. He wonders if it is possible that Death incarnate is really standing in front of him. Amy, playing Love, meets Howard shortly afterward. She emphasizes that it is love that makes our griefs so deep. She tells him that without love there would be no pain, but also no joy. She reminds him of his love for his daughter and that this love is alive despite her physical absence. Howard feels the pain of loss again, but this time he begins to realize that the love he feels hasn't gone anywhere, that it continues to live in his heart even if he doesn't realize it. Raffi, playing Time, concludes the series of meetings. He tells Howard that time is not a cure, as many people think, but it can help him rethink what is happening, accept it, and find new meanings. Time doesn't cure, but it does give people a chance to adapt, cope with loss, and start over. Howard begins to think about what he has missed by wallowing in his grief and that the time he is losing is not coming back. In the course of these encounters, Howard gradually begins to open up, albeit reluctantly. He sees in each of the characters a reflection of his own fears and pain. He begins to realize that his pain is not a punishment but part of his human nature, and that everyone on Earth experiences loss, fears, and disappointments. But at the same time he realizes that life goes on, and that he must find a way to move on, despite everything that has happened. In parallel, the storyline reveals the inner conflicts of each of his friends. Whit tries to establish a relationship with his daughter and realizes that work and money cannot replace love and attention. He begins to realize his mistakes and that his obsession with his career has led to alienation in his relationship with his family. His meetings with his daughter become a challenge for him, because he has to win her trust again, to show that he is ready to change for her. It's not easy, but Whit gradually finds the strength to do it. Claire, who has spent her whole life building her career and putting her personal life on the back burner, begins to think about her future. She feels that time is running out and that her dream of becoming a mother may never come true. Her fears intensify and she begins to feel loneliness, even when she is among friends. This crisis makes her think about what is really important in life and what she should do to be happy. In the end, she decides to adopt a child, realizing that biological motherhood is not the only way to fulfill her dream. Simon, who hides his illness from everyone, is experiencing internal conflict. He is afraid to tell the truth to his wife and children because he doesn't want to worry them. However, as he interacts with Howard and his friends, he begins to realize that honesty and openness is not a weakness but a strength. He realizes that his family has a right to know the truth, and that he must trust them to face the challenges ahead together. At one point, Howard meets Madeline, a woman who has also lost a child. Their conversations become important and therapeutic for him, as Madeline understands his pain like no one else. She shares her story, how she coped with the loss, and this helps Howard to see his situation from a different angle. He begins to realize that his grief should not define his future life, that he can and should find a way to move on with his life and keep his daughter's memory alive. The climax of the movie comes when Howard decides to visit the place where he spent time with his daughter and where she died. This place is associated with the most bitter memories for him, but he realizes that in order to deal with the past, he must face it. At this point, for the first time in a long time, he allows himself to openly express his feelings, cry, and talk to his daughter as if she were there. This moment becomes a release for him from the heaviness he has carried within him all these years. He then returns to his friends and their relationship slowly begins to recover. He accepts their support and realizes that he is not alone in his pain. He realizes that despite all the difficulties, life goes on and that he has friends who are willing to help him through this journey. In the film's finale, Howard takes steps to return to work and begin to build a new life with a new understanding and acceptance of what has happened. His friends also find solutions to their problems. Whit reconnects with his daughter Claire, begins the adoption process, and Simon finally tells his family about his illness and they begin to find solutions together. The film ends on a positive note, emphasizing that even in the most difficult moments of life there is always hope, and that the support of loved ones and honesty with oneself help to cope with the most difficult trials. Thus, Phantom Beauty is a deeply emotional story about love, loss, and the search for meaning in life. The movie raises important questions about how people cope with grief, how important it is to have the support of friends and family, and how despite all the trials, life goes on, giving us a chance for a new beginning.